materials, those complex, sometimes dense, cutting-edge reports, and turn them into pure, actionable knowledge.
Exactly. We don't just summarize. We're here to give you the scaffolding, the why behind the what.
The goal is to get you beyond just feeling informed to actually being well-informed.
Especially now when information overload is just, well, it's the default state of being.
And today we are tackling what feels like the defining challenge of this century. It's the sheer volume of information flooding us and that agonizing difficulty of knowing what's reliably true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even harder now that so much of that information is being synthesized or filtered or just straight up generated by these incredibly sophisticated AI systems.
It really is the ultimate modern challenge. How do you build a robust, a trustworthy firewall against all that noise, the ambiguity, the outright falsehoods, without accidentally shutting down legitimate discovery?
That's the tightrope.
It is. We aren't drowning in a lack of data. I think we can all agree on that. We're drowning in a lack of confidence in that data.
Exactly. And the listener who shared this document with us, well, they sent us something truly comprehensive. It's called the Discovery, Intelligence, Governance, and Epistemic Framework.
And it's not just a technical spec, is it?
Not at all. It reads less like a tool spec and more like a philosophical mandate. It's a blueprint for how trustworthy knowledge must be built, especially when algorithms are in the driver's seat.
That distinction is so important. The sources here, they present this as an answer to that core problem of reliability.
It's an attempt to impose the strict, almost unforgiving rigor of the scientific method onto the very messy, high-speed reality of modern data.
Of data synthesis, yeah.
So let's frame this problem properly. What is the fundamental failure of the systems we have now, both our own human processes and the existing AML systems that this framework is trying to solve?
Well, the framework hones in on one foundational issue. It's this complete inability of current systems to reliably transform all this fragmented information we have.
Right, the fire hose of data.
Exactly, into what you could actually call justified, reproducible scientific knowledge. We've built these incredible systems for finding patterns, for spotting correlations.
Not for verifying them.
But terrible systems for verifying the origins, the assumptions, the validity of those patterns.
Justified. That one word, it changes everything. Because it immediately prioritizes the path you took over the final destination, right?
It does. It says the how matters more than the what. The critical struggle, as the document puts it, is not about gathering more data. It's about being able to evaluate precisely what evidence supports which claims.
Under what conditions?
Under what specific limiting conditions, and this is maybe the most critical part, with what quantifiable degree of uncertainty.
So if you can't trace a claim all the way back to its origin and understand every single step of that journey.
The framework argues it's epistemically worthless. It's just noise that happens to look like a fact.
Okay, let's get specific then. Let's talk about the critique of existing AI and machine learning systems, because this framework draws a very, very sharp line here. It's almost hostile.
It is, and for good reason. Current AI, and we're talking especially about large language models here, they excel at generating outputs that are plausible,
right,
or statistically likely. They're trained on these immense correlations in massive data sets, and that gives them this extraordinary fluency. They sound confident, they sound knowledgeable.
And that fluency is constantly being mistaken for genuine understanding. That's the classic failure mode we're all becoming familiar with.
Precisely. And this is what the framework identifies as the core structural failure. They lack preserved, built-in mechanisms for provenance, assumptions, uncertainty, or justification.
They can't show their work.
They can't.
No.
So when an LLM confidently tells you that, I don't know, Thomas Edison invented the car, which sounds plausible but is wrong.
Yeah.
It's doing that because it sees a massive statistical correlation between the word Edison and invention and transportation in its training data.
But it doesn't have that little voice inside that says, wait a second, where is the citable, verifiable piece of evidence that supports this specific claim?
It lacks that internal mechanism entirely. There is no wait a second step.
Which means the entire system is optimized for performance metrics we can easily measure, like speed and plausibility, but it completely lacks the ability to self-audit.
Yes. If the data it was trained on shifts, or if some of it was just plain wrong to begin with, it can't backtrack and explicitly say, my previous answer was based on flawed input X, and I am now correcting it because of new input Y.
It just recalculates a new plausible answer.
It recalculates a new plausible answer, and the memory of why the old one was wrong is just gone. It's overwritten.
Yeah.
The system lacks that critical ability for what the framework calls explicit belief revision. that is grounded in actual evidence.
So it's a black box that's optimized for sounding right, not for being verifiably scientifically correct.
That's the perfect summary.
Okay, that clarifies the problem perfectly. So let's unpack the core principle. If the old systems prioritize speed, raw accuracy, or statistical likelihood, what does discovery intelligence optimize for instead? What's its North Star?
It optimizes for one thing, epistemic integrity.
Epistemic integrity.
Yeah, and think of it like this. An aerospace engineer who is designing a wing for a plane, they prioritize structural integrity above everything else,
Of course.
even if making it sound adds weight or cost or time to the manufacturing process. Epistemic integrity is the same idea for knowledge. It means you only produce claims that are traceable back to immutable evidence, that are explicitly conditioned.
So they state their own limits?
They state their own limits, they are fully uncertainty aware, and they are fundamentally structurally open to being challenged and revised.
Okay, so we're making a trade-off. We're sacrificing velocity for structural soundness. If I ask a question, this kind of system might take, say, 10 times longer to respond.
Easily.
But when it does, it doesn't just give me the answer. It gives me the answer, the footnotes, the context, and a full disclosure document on why that answer might be wrong next month.
That is the bargain. The source material is unequivocal on this. It says a result is valuable only if it can be independently examined, challenged, and this is key reproduced in principle.
It's the scientific method.
It is. Justification, provenance, and the ability to transparently revise. Those are prioritized over raw speed or any other performance metric you can think of.
And that gets to a critical insight here. Speed encourages shortcuts. It just does. If you allow a system or even a person to bypass the rigorous steps of verification,
You might get a quick answer.
you'll get a quick answer, but you risk building an entire skyscraper of knowledge on a fundamentally shaky foundation.
And this framework enshrines that rigorous mindset. It establishes a really powerful principle. An explicit, well-reasoned "I do not know" is a better outcome than an ungrounded, overconfident answer.
So I do not know because the evidence is insufficient or because these two key studies contradict each other. That's not a failure of the system.
It's the height of epistemic integrity. That admission of limits is a feature, not a bug.
That is a fundamental paradigm shift. I mean, we are so accustomed to systems that have to produce an answer, any answer.
Right.
But here, saying, I don't know, and here is exactly why the current evidence prevents me from making a justified claim, that's considered a win.
It is, in fact, the very definition of success for this system. The framework sums it up perfectly. It says discovery intelligence succeeds when it produces claims where the supporting evidence, the initial assumptions, and the quantified uncertainties are so explicit and so detailed
That a human can check its work.
that a knowledgeable human can independently evaluate, reproduce, or even falsify them. The system doesn't demand your trust. It earns it by giving you all the tools you need to verify its work for yourself.
We've established the why, this absolute necessity for justified knowledge in an age of, well, plausible nonsense.
Right.
Now we have to move into the how, and this is where the governance framework imposes some serious discipline. We're diving into what it calls the Canonical Discovery Loop.
And this loop is described as the invariant rule. It is a fixed, non-negotiable path that has to be followed every single time raw evidence gets transformed into accepted knowledge.
It's like a regulatory framework for thinking.
It is. It's designed to prevent any entity, whether it's a human analyst or an AI, from cutting corners. And the rule is brutally simple. The order of the steps must never be changed, never be skipped, and never be collapsed together.
Let's walk through the 7 mandatory steps then, starting right at the beginning. Step 1, evidence ingestion.
Okay, so this step defines what we're even allowed to call a fact. Evidence in this system is defined as any external observation, any measurement, experiment, or documented result that exists independently of the system's own reasoning process.
This is the raw input, the untouchable source material.
Exactly. And the crucial constraint here, this is really a philosophical line in the sand, is about what cannot be considered evidence.
Right.
Evidence absolutely does not include interpretations or conclusions or predictions or any opinions that were generated by the discovery intelligence system itself.
So the system can't be its own source of truth. It has to be grounded in something outside of itself.
It must always be grounded in external reality.
It reminds me of legal discovery, the raw email chain, that's the evidence. But the prosecutor's summary of what that email means, that's just interpretation.
That is an excellent analogy. The evidence has to stand on its own.
And the framework is crystal clear on this.
Completely. Evidence must exist and be recorded before any internal reasoning or claims can even begin. Because every single thing that comes after has to be grounded in those inspectable original inputs. If the system tried to generate an assertion without first logging the external fact that triggered it,
It's an invalid move. The whole chain is broken.
instant invalidation, the process stops right there.
Okay, so we've recorded the raw, immutable facts. Now we get to step 2. Normalization. Why is this a mandatory intermediate step? Why can't we just start interpreting the evidence right away?
Because the real world is messy. Normalization is the process of translating that raw, chaotic evidence into consistent, structured representation so you can actually compare apples to apples.
Can you give us an example?
Sure, think about trying to aggregate data from a bunch of different medical trials. One source might report a drug dosage in milligrams per kilogram of body weight.
Yeah.
Another reports it in total grams per day. A third might use some proprietary internal naming convention for the chemical compound, and the scales they use for measuring efficacy could be completely different.
So normalization is about addressing all those differences in format, scale, units, terminology.
All of it.
Yeah.
It's essentially creating a common, universal language for all the collected facts so that they can be compared fairly and logically.
It's the ultimate garbage in, garbage out prevention step.
It is. Because if you interpret evidence without normalizing it first, your comparisons become distorted. Your conclusions might just reflect a simple unit mismatch like confusing Celsius with Fahrenheit instead of a genuine scientific discovery.
But the source notes a very specific, very important constraint on this step.
Yes, normalization must not add meaning or interpretation. It has to be a purely mechanical structural transformation.
So you're just reorganizing the data, not judging it.
Exactly. You are standardizing the data structure, but you are not yet applying any intellectual judgment to what that data means. If you let interpretation creep into the normalization step, then every single claim you make later on inherits that hidden bias. Normalization is about consistency, not meaning.
That makes sense. And that structural consistency then allows us to move to step 3, interpretation. Now the system can finally start, well, thinking.
Right, this is the brainstorming phase. This is where the system proposes possible meanings, where it looks for relationships, for correlations, for implications within that normalized evidence.
This is where the pattern recognition algorithms get to run free.
This is where hypotheses are generated, yes. But, and it's a huge but, this step is still rigorously bounded. It's allowed to propose ideas, but it is absolutely forbidden from asserting that any of those ideas are true.
Okay, so it can say, this looks like a correlation, but not, this is a correlation.
Precisely. And interpretation has to remain fundamentally separable from the evidence itself. That's a critical governance rule.
Why is that separation so important?
Because it means that if new contradictory evidence comes in later, the original evidence layer remains fixed and precise.